As I said in the last video, an array is a data structure, and it is in fact one of the most fundamental data structures in any language. An array is a data structure that is absolutely unequivocally, or whatever way you say that, sorry about these painkillers are getting me, okay? An array is super important. Understanding how to work with arrays is very important, okay? And what's really remarkable is most people, when they first come across them, they are a little frightened of them. They say, ooh, wow, subscripts. Ooh, what's this number business all about? But it goes back to what I said earlier, right? When I had this other thing, and I don't know if I can bring it back. Yeah, there it is. What I said earlier is an array is nothing more than a very convenient way of naming characters. You guys, literally, when I was first programming, I literally took these strings and I built them up. I literally had a thing that was known as concatenation, which we will get into, that would literally take the number 5 and concatenate it to the number X, or to the letter X, so that I could create a variable name that I in turn could use it. So I was using arrays long before I even knew they existed. Did they exist back in that day? By all means they did. Everybody grows in programming, right? But I was using them for a long time because I knew the value of taking similar pieces of data and organizing them together. Okay? So Python doesn't, as I said, have what's known as a native array data structure. But it does have a thing that's called a list. And we know what a list is as well. Now, when we take something and we organize it the way that I described earlier, where you have a person's whole name, or maybe a string that's all stuck together, or a car, you know, you're organizing all the cars in your garage. So your garage would be an object called garage. You would have inside your garage car, which would be an object, and you might have several of them, okay? When you organize in that way, we use lists, because the only way that we can really keep a handle on what's going on in memory is if we forget about trying to manage the memory of every single thing that sits inside of an array. It's better just to keep track of the address. And then we'll just leave it to something else to keep track of what's sitting in that address, okay? So lists, in truth, are only holding memory addresses. But from a programmer's point of view, that address is, it feels as though it's the object that we're interested in. It feels as though it's a string or whatever, okay? And in fact, if I create a list in Python, when I create a number or whatever, it's actually going to store the number literally in a neat little package. Okay, it's going to wrap the integer 5, for example, in a neat little package called an object. Okay, so what I've done here is I've opened up the Python shell on top of my IDE because I just want to run a few tests. Gotta love the Python shell, all right? And what I want to do is I want to start out with my first list. And I'll say that my first list is equal to that. And when I hit enter, it does what we would expect it to do. Nothing, right? Except that in truth, my list was created. So now if I type in my list, M-Y-L-I-S-T, like so, there it is. It gives me the list, okay? If I say print my list, open bracket, 2, close bracket, what's going to happen is it's going to find the second element of the list and print it. So to you, which element would that be? Is it going to print a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6? Well, clearly it's not going to be a 6 or a 5 or a 4, but there may be some question about these guys over here, right? Well, let's finish this out and see what it gives us. It printed the number 3, okay? So that means that element number 2 in this list of numbers is actually right there. That means that element number 1 is here and that element 0 is here. That says that 0 is a significant placeholder for arrays, and this is the thing that kills people. That thing right there. They look at that that whole notion of 0 being significant, and their mind goes in tilt, okay? Computers, 0 exists. 0 is a place in memory. 0, the first memory cell, which is addressed 0, it exists, okay? As far as a computer is concerned, you cannot have nothing. You have to have something all the time. So 0 is going to be significant, okay? So when we point out a particular location in the array, such as this, we call that indexing, all right? So 2 is the index of literally the third position of the array. So in Python, if I wanted to, for example, my list, open bracket, 2, colon, we'll say 5, means that I'm interested in the second position through to the 5th position of the array or the list. Hit enter and see, it gave it to me. Or if I want to see everything up to the, say, the 3rd position, I can go my list, open bracket, and put in a colon like so, and say the 3rd location. I'll go 4 like so. That'll work. You're going to see that it's going to give us the first 4 elements of the array. And if I want to see the last 2 elements of the array, I can go my list, open the last 2. Yeah, let's try it out. Let's see. I'll go 2 and see what that does, and do a colon like that and see if I have it right. Hit enter and see what it gives me. Oh, that's what it did. Okay, so it dumped the first 2 and gave me the remaining ones in the list. So I had it off. Okay, so what happens then if I go my list, open bracket, colon, close bracket? Let's see what that does. And it just simply gives me the entire list. So when I type in my list, just like that, it's going to be the exact same thing as if I had typed in an open bracket, colon, and a close bracket, because this gives me basically the range of the elements in my list. All right, so remember, in Python, they're not arrays, they're lists, okay? But some people, because of Python programmers, sometimes interchange the terminology. But if you lock into the correct terminology to begin with, when you move from Python into another computer programming language, then you won't be too surprised. Because if you're thinking about arrays and expecting a certain behavior, such as storing a string in the first position and storing a number in the second position, for example, let's try this out. I'm going to go my list. How did I create that? I said equals, and I did an open bracket like so, right? The first one I'm going to say test, just like so. Put it in quotes. And the second position, I'm just going to say 5. The third position, I'm going to say C, like so. And the 4th position, I'll say 4. And I'll close it. And let's see what it does. My list. And as you see, it mixed and matched data types. Super important to realize that Python is operating in terms of a list as opposed to an array, because if you're thinking of it as an array and you go over to a programming language like Java, for example, what's going to end up happening is you're going to declare yourself an array, and the moment you try to put test and 5 into the same array, it's going to give you a nasty gram. Okay, it's going to say, hey, what are you thinking about? Don't do that. Okay, I want you to come up with something else. Well, in Java, that would actually be called an array list. They have various names from one programming language to the next, which means, goes back to my main point that I've been making all along the semester, is develop that skill to be able to look up how a programming language works. You really need to understand how to do that, okay? Because a list in one language is not necessarily a list in another language. In Java, for example, it's Python lists are array lists in Java. So they change the terminology changes from one language to the next. Okay, so let's say that I want to get these numbers right here into a list. As it turns out, I'm using PyCharm now. I've created a list here, and now I am concentrating and staring very hard at this list. Boom. Did you see that? It almost pulled it off. I need to put in one more comma. There, that fixes that. So there's my handy dandy list. So I guess the first thing I want to do is show you guys how to output the elements that are in your list. And it's pretty straightforward. You use what is called an enumerator, okay? At least that's what they call it in some languages. In other languages, they just call it a good old-fashioned loop. We're going to say for, and I'm just say e, and what I'm doing now is I'm literally declaring a variable. In other languages, I may have to say int e, okay? But here I just say e in my list. Remember, whenever we're doing a loop, we have to put a colon at the beginning of it so that it remembers to indent everything, right? And now all I have to do is just print it. Print E. Shall we try that out? And this little trick with the my list thing up here is basically because I'm on those painkillers. They are seriously happy pills. They put me in an amazingly good mood right now. Even though my kidney stone still hurts, I don't really care. Some of you guys are probably laughing. I know I would be. So there it is. Let's see what happens if I run this thing. All right. Run test. And there it is. 2598132, just like before. Fact is, if I wanted the output to look exactly like it looked before when we were first putting this thing together, I could say oh, let's see, quote x equals, right, close quote, plus, because remember I'm concatenating this together, str, because you've got to turn it into a string or it will not work. And now let's run it and see what it does. Just like we saw before. Isn't that cool? So this will literally go through my list from the very beginning to the very end, and it will print every single element within my list. Another way to do this is to take it kind of like in a pseudocode point of view. Remember, in pseudocode, if we wanted to do a for loop, we would say for open parenthesis int I equals 0 to get things started, right? And then we want to say I is less than something. But what would that be? It would be basically the length of my list, right? Well, in Python, if we want to find out what the length of a list is, we can just do it this way. len stands for length, open parenthesis, my list. That's pretty straightforward, huh? So there we have it. And then we go ahead and we pick up the semicolon thing right here, and we say I++, because we're incrementing it. And then we do whatever we want to do inside our nice little loop. So what am I trying to drive home? What am I trying to communicate right here? Well, what I'm really interested in communicating is this whole notion of length my list. Because you see, in some computing languages, this is the only way to do this.